Awesome. Nice to see everyone. Very excited to be here. So, for a little bit of context and background, Alex and I are from San Francisco, and we feel like we see a very different bubble of the world. Who here has been to San Francisco? Oh, I love it. So, what we want to do today is bring a little bit of San Francisco hyper engineering, people going crazy, and share that with the rest of the community. It's not just the aspect of look at these crazy things that people do, but how can we actually get some takeaways from that? There's a lot of people running a bunch of coding agents on like multiple monitors, having thousands of dollars of spend, and what we want to do is distill that into something more productive. So how can we learn from that, and how can we kind of take a step up and bridge that gap to make the most out of our AI coding tools? So that's kind of what we want to talk about. And first things first, who here uses Twitter? Who's seen these crazy Twitter demos with people with amazing setups, running stuff 24/7? So, for example, McKay, he hooked up Claude Code to Mac Mini, runs it 24/7. So, at all times of day, 24/7, he has Claude Code just chunking out code for him. Another tweet here, someone is running 12 to 16 instances of coding agents all simultaneously on a vertical monitor. Third one, this guy has actually gone out of his way to get a custom keyboard hand, and he's mapped different coding workflow shortcuts to every different little keybind. And we want to be realistic about this, though. So we don't want to just, see people have these crazy $10,000 spends, but we want to actually get the most value out of our tools. It's very easy to download a coding stack, right? You can use an AI code editor. You can use something like Windsurf. I can have Claude Code. I can have Codex. I can have Jules from Gemini. I can have Devin. But just because I've installed them doesn't mean I'm getting the most value out of them, right? What we really want to do is take these tools and use them to their full potential. For example, in Claude Code, you can pay for 5x, 20x usage, and that usage resets every 5 hours. If you're not using the full value that you get, if you're not using as much as you can in 5 hours, there's a lost opportunity cost, right? So what we want to talk about is basically how can we learn to get the most value out of these tools, build a good coding stack, and kind of, make the most value of what we have today. So once again, here are some of the main things. People having such crazy spends that they're not only using the $200 plan, they're getting multiple instances. So, someone not only signed up for Claude Code Max and pays $200, they have multiple subscriptions. They're fully utilizing a $200 plan and then getting another and a third one. And there's, people running them in parallel. So how can we go from just having a little coding copilot to something like this? So how do we kind of bridge that gap to becoming in the top 1% of coding engineers? So
Okay.
Alex, take it off.
Yeah. So just to recap, a lot of this stuff is how do you push beyond, right? You have one license, get 10 licenses, right? We've seen people spend upwards of $80,000 per month individually on code spend, which is it's a lot of money, right? And what this has enabled is a few things. Number one is it's a major shift from traditional software engineering, where you're very hands-on, directly looking at your code, and a lot more towards prompt management, workflow management, and team management, right? It's like not just your productivity, it's everyone that is affected by your blast radius in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, this has led to a lot of smaller teams, too. And we've seen really small teams accomplish so much in such short order. So anyway, we're going to kind of walk through, what is this kind of mindset? And how do you adopt this mindset so you can make yourself a 1000x developer, a 1000x hyper engineer? All right, so a quick question. Who here has played MMOs like RuneScape or World of Warcraft in the past? Any gamers in the room? Okay, so there's this kind of famous joke where if you're not playing the game and you're gaining experience by, killing monsters or, chopping down trees, you're wasting experience, right? So you go to dinner, XP waste. You're going to sleep, XP waste. And a lot of people have kind of taken this to an extreme. You're at a baseball game. If you're not playing the game, it's XP waste. And so what we've actually seen is a lot of the software engineers we've met who are hyper engineers, they've adopted this no experience waste mindset, right? So kind of in the traditional world, we have, let's say 6 to 8 hours of sleep per night. You have some downtime in the morning, you're commuting, you take a lunch break. So realistically, you maybe have, 8 hours, 9 hours of productive workday, right? What you want to do is, if you're a hyper engineer, you really want to shift your mindset. For all the downtime you have, how do you have agents working for you while you sleep? How do you have agents work for you when you're driving? When you're on a coffee break and you have an idea for a feature or a bug fix, how do you spawn an army of agents to do the work for you, right? And this is the mindset shift that the hyper engineers adopt, which is minimize the XP waste, figure out how to turn the dead time into productive time, and then shift your mindset from focusing on building things to being more of a manager and reviewing code and reviewing outputs. So just for context, what this usually leads to is a lot higher spend, right? And the way you justify this, if you're able to actually kind of account for what your output will become, right? You only had 8 hours a day before. If you're able to get 80 hours a day of work, these bills really kind of do shrink, relatively speaking, right? So this is actually my personal spend bill. I spent over $4,000 last month. But we also see a lot of other folks who are spending on the upwards of $100, $200 per day using Claude Code, they're using Devin, they're using other models on the run. So you should first expect that your usage is going to go way up. But if your manager's giving you pushback or you feel like it's expensive, you have to also recontextualize. You're getting a lot more work done in a lot less time. So what this is also leading to is a lot smaller teams. And I don't want to alarm anyone in the room, but we do see what's happening is smaller teams are able to get so much more work done because they've been able to turn the dead time into productive work. So there's a founder that we know, his name's Samuel Strohschein. He managed a team of about 8 developers on an open source project in Berlin. And he was very focused on just normal coding. And then he got Claude pilled. He got introduced to Claude Code and realized he could chain these workflows together to constantly have work for him done. And he fired his entire team once he figured that out. And he's been able to match the productivity levels of his entire team because they were not adopting the AI tools in the same way that he was able to. So this is a screenshot of him. He has 3 monitors. He shifted his entire process towards more test-driven development. So he writes the tests, he writes the specs, he writes the requirements, and then he fires up basically 10 windows of agents to work together to solve this stuff. We'll go into details later on how this works, but this is just one such use case of an extreme developer doing that. Another one is this website was made entirely by an indie developer based out of India. He has, I think, no formal training or background in computer science. He's 20 years old, I think. And this website was entirely generated in 4 hours by Codex. And he was able to do so by putting it on a loop, by assigning a set of instructions. So he has several agents working together with very deliberate tasks, instructions, and capabilities. And he just set it on autopilot and was able to produce that website one shot. We're also seeing a lot of tools that are emerging that are focusing around different workflows. So here's a tool that I use called Bottleneck, which is designed for managing multiple parallelized coding agents and then shifting your work from being an individual software developer towards more of an engineering manager where you're reviewing tasks that were assigned to agents and then you basically Kanban these workflow pull requests into code-based consolidations. All right, so what's the TLDR? What we're seeing with the hyper engineers is, by and large, management is becoming the new bottleneck, right? So typically, we used to really like programming. Programming's fun. It's intellectually challenging. But the most productivity is actually coming from assignment, right? Creating tests, creating spec documents, and then figuring out how do you orchestrate and manage these agents to get the work done for you. A lot of this does involve prompt engineering. A lot of it does require internal management of your own just workflows. And then also a lot of it thinking. Just how do I get agents to work for me while I'm sleeping? And then once you're able to do that, you can do such incredible things like firing your entire team, or maybe not, or turning your entire team into 1000x engineers. So I'm going to pass it back to Vibhu, who's going to show off some demonstrations.
So I think it's been good to see high-level examples, but we do want to do a practical guide, right? So what really matters? How do you implement, how do you kind of be more like these people that are getting a lot of value? It's not this, it's not the buzzwords, it's not hype. You don't need to know MCP, GRPO, LLMOS. You don't need to know all these terms. It's actually a lot simpler than that. But the terms, you know, they're good to know. You should always learn more, so feel free to take a picture, learn stuff. But in reality, what you want to do is just embrace the tools that work best for you. Everyone has different workflows, and sometimes you want to do custom stuff. Alex built his tool himself. I have a different workflow. I drive around a lot, so I built a thing where I can basically call a phone number. It kicks off async agents in the background and texts me updates. That's really nice for my commute when I have to drive around. For some people, they have different workflows, but at the end of the day, what you really want to care about is your outcome, right? You want to be able to measure, are you actually writing more code? Are you more effective? Do you have better code? Are there fewer regressions? Are you shipping more features? It's not just about building a stack, right? You don't want to just try all the tools and have them sit there. You want to work with what works best for you. And you want to have a differentiation between hands-on coding when you're kind of actually in sync, you're using live coding copilots, you're actually coding, and then you want to distinct out when you have stuff in the background, right? So a lot of people, when they wake up, they'll shoot off tasks to Devin, to Codex, then they'll go about their morning. As they enter the office, as they get their coffee, they've already got their day started. They have PRs ready for them to look at. And same thing, at the end of the day, right? They'll send off PRs. When they come back, they have PRs to review. Not PRs to review, they'll also get them reviewed with coding agents. So whatever works for your workflow, the big thing is you just want to make sure that you're actually getting value and getting impact out of it. Now, there's a lot of value in tools that I feel like people don't really utilize. Using AI coding tools is not the same as traditional software, right? It's not like a cloud bill. It's not like GPU rentals. When I rent GPUs, I have to pay $15, $20 an hour, and everyone wants full utilization, right? When you're paying for a database, whenever you're paying for cloud servers, GPUs, everyone wants to get the most value for what they pay for, right? They want to make sure that their GPUs aren't sitting there idle. Why don't we do the same with coding copilots? When you pay for a plan that resets every 5 hours, why don't you use what you're given in 5 hours? When you shift the mindset, you'll start to notice that the more you use these tools, the more you'll find your own workflow for what works best for you, right? Some people code on the side. They're more so product managers, designers, just engineering managers. They're not hands-on coding every day. But instead of, having to talk to an engineer for everything, they can now asynchronously just start to build little demos. For other people that code all the time, they can get really good speed ups by using, async coding agents. So depending on what the workflow is, one thing you should try to do is just maximize the amount of value that you get from the tools that you play. Now, more practically, don't expect major life changes, right? Don't just try to build an entire application in one shot. Don't just say okay, I want to rebuild Devin, go off and do it. That's not what's going to work. What you really want to do is break down your problems into simple, small, little features, right? And you want to really communicate with models well. So think about if I just tell you, hey, go build X. That's not as great as, hey, I want to build something that does this. It has these different features. I prefer this language. I prefer these libraries. So be as verbose as you can and give the model as much as you can, and it'll probably do better. Always use plan mode. Nowadays, all these coding tools, they have a planning step where a model will basically chat with you about what you want to build, share a plan, make sure it looks good, then go off and execute. And, in your prompting itself, you can start to do things where you have AI do some meta prompting, have it improve its own prompts. There's always a delta between what you think you want and what the model thinks you want, right? So try to think of what is the model actually seeing, right? What's exactly going into the model? Models read pure text. They read Markdown. Humans don't really write Markdown. We read Markdown. So if we need to, translate and talk to a model, it's better to just spill out your thoughts, have a model rewrite it in Markdown in a way that's good for the model, and then pass it to itself. And of course, don't over-engineer early. just start vibe-evaling. So when you're first building things, when you're first getting started, don't be super uptight and set on, okay, I need to hit this level of performance, this level of this and that. Just test stuff, see if it works, gut check it, and then expect to rewrite your code pretty often. And you know, once you start to get to the feel of things, you don't want to get stuck in this like demo tweet trap, right? Where you just build little one-off apps that don't work. What we really want to do is eventually start to ship production code, right? So sure, we can have little co-pilots, little small features that we've built, but when it comes time to take those things to production, there's a few basic things you want to do, right? So first and foremost, you probably want to start adding logging, right? So if you're using LLMs, you want to log inputs, outputs, use any of the observability tools, start to build some basic evals, do some basic regression testing. So as you change your prompts, does stuff actually get better? Does it get worse? You can start to add more guardrails, optimize for the end system, you know, see like, okay, can I improve latency here? Can I do some calls in parallel so my system acts faster? You can start doing this whole term of like context engineering. Before we were just kind of vaguely throwing in whatever into the prompts. You can start to optimize those things. But the workflow is more so get started, build quick things, improve and iterate them later. It's kind of a separate workflow. From there, you want to start building robust tests, right? You're having AI write a lot of code. You want to make sure it's not breaking your application. How do you build the tests? You can use your own CI tests, or you can just have AI write them, right? So once again, it all goes back to how much can you manage, delegate, and offload to coding tools. They're actually pretty good when you give them a lot of work to do. And you know, that's kind of just a high level of what our talk is, but we wanted to save some time for Q&A.
Additionally, we did share some links on the QR code. So if you'd like to follow up, reach out to us on social media or read some of the blog posts that kind of detail the stuff. You'll find out more there. All right, so yeah, thank you. Okay, and so we do have time for a handful of questions. So if anybody would like to ask how to go from vibe coding to hyper-engineering, we're ready to go.
Unless you have specific questions, I'm going to throw up the fun workflows as the background. Those are fun slides.
Yeah, just pick anyone.
Hi guys, thank you for your time. Do you know, or do you have any reference about using voice to help coding?
Yeah, so can you go back to the slide with the Claude claw?
The Claude claw, yes.
Yeah, so in particular, this guy on the far right of the screen, he actually just talks to his computer. So he puts his hand on the claw, and then each macro is all voice controlled. So I think it's like his index finger down is speech to text. And so what he does is just basically speaks to his computer all day and puts his hand on the claw. And me personally, also, what I found has been enormously helpful is using your phone. I'm at a coffee shop or I'm taking a walk outside, taking voice notes, and then sending those to a background agent, such as Codex, or anything like this. Devin is also quite helpful. Just typing it in. You don't even need to edit the English that much. You don't even need to edit your speech. The models are usually good enough at reading in between the lines to help you create a working plan.
Whisperflow is another really good tool that people use on Macs. Basically, all you do is talk. There's plugins for everything. You just speak in voice, and it transcribes and gives you the text. And I think voice is actually a better medium than text sometimes. People are often better at talking through their thoughts, rambling, explaining every little feature that they want. And models are really good at dealing with that. You're often better giving more information in your plan mode than you are giving less. And if you're better at speaking, use any of the solutions. Whisperflow works, have a custom shortcut, but it's something we see a lot more and more of.
Yeah, so I wanted to get a little bit of a better insight of like how to actually set up one of those 12 agents coding thingies, because we see stuff like, oh, I ran this in a loop within a script, I got this MD file with an orchestrator and these 6 update agents that it orchestrates. So like, in the day-to-day of an engineer, how would a hyper engineering setup look like actually tools-wise?
So one of them you can see here in the middle, he has chosen 12 terminal windows. But I think the real answer is it depends on your workflow, right? You shouldn't go out and try 12, 5, you shouldn't even try 2 instances until you're really hitting the limits of 1, right? So the first step, like my transition into using multiple instances of Cloud Code was basically, I would have one and use it as much as I can for one project. When I start to use like Codex with GPT-5 Pro and it's taking 20 minutes, I would first start with a second project, right? So something kind of unrelated. And now I'm doing 2 things that are pretty different, and I'm starting to understand, okay, this window is doing this. While it's working, I'm working on another. But the real answer is, you start maximizing one tool, and then as you see use for others, depending on the workflow, you start to build in, and you can see what other people do. There's a lot of great blog posts, Reddit posts of how people have set up different instances. There's arena modes, there's like Git work trees for different branching. But I think the real advice is start with one, use it as much as you can, and once you realize you need a second, you try it, see what works, see what doesn't, see whether it's a different tool, see what it is.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think there are some specific tools. So if you're trying to do multi-terminal management, I think the one is called WEG-term, W-E-G term. But I think besides the point, everything Vibhu said is correct. But in terms of parallelization, one thing I found to be extremely helpful is running the same prompt against multiple different tasks or agents, and then just play survival of the fittest, right? So what I generally do is if I have a task or a feature I want to write, I'll actually send the exact same prompt to 4 different agents, and then after they're done cooking, I will review them all. So the app I was showing earlier is actually, I purposely built that just so that I could review multiple pull requests, right? So the big challenge is you get so much code and you just have to review that it works. And that is a major unlock, right? So consider the fact that you could take the same prompt, launch it at multiple Devons, launch it at multiple Claudes, multiple codexes, and you're going to be a lot, more successful with that. Because look, even if there's a 10% chance that it gets it right, the models are so cheap. It's just worth it, right? Just throw the prompt, and you'll get a 10% chance of an infinite Einstein solving your task in one shot. So that's what I would generally recommend.
To slightly add on as well, I think a big solution to trying and using multiple instances is you'll build your own small tools, right? This helped Alex. For me, I built a version where I can kind of check in, get text updates, and that's just a custom little workflow that I'm probably the only one that uses. And another tip, when the models kind of seem at their limit of capability or they're really not getting something, sometimes it helps to just try again. Like when something has tried it for 20 minutes, it has context of what it's tried. It's pretty underrated how far you can get by asking just try again with what you've already tried. People don't just, ask again.
For years, we've been hearing that limiting work in progress and minimizing multitasking is the key to productivity. How do you avoid the mental overload and cognitive overload of managing so many tasks at once and switching between one task is a front end, one task is a back end, another task is, a full website? How do you prevent the overload?
So the question is basically multitasking versus, switching cognitive flow in what you're working on. I think the thing there is there's a delta between async and sync coding, right? I don't want to just be firing off back-end changes and then working on front-end and then reviewing PRs. Like, back to Alex's diagram, there's kind of this middle zone of when you're actually coding, it's not much different than what you were doing before, right? This is focused coding with something like Cursor, Claude Code, Windsurf. You're actively doing your own coding with coding copilots. Asynchronous coding is kind of background agents, right? So they're not meant to, I haven't found great ways to kind of do them in parallel, but it's more so you fully delegate some things and you check in when like at a different time. But it's a weird workflow, right? You don't want to switch back and forth, but when you're doing live focused coding, you kind of stay in that zone in the no EXP ways, not, while you're sleeping, while you're just paying for wasted compute. That's when you can fire off different background tasks. And that keeps you in a different mental state, if that makes sense.
I'd also add that eventually you find the pace that you're able to adjust to. I think at the extreme end, you could take your entire backlog and then throw background agents at it, and then you end up with 100 pull requests that you have to review, and it becomes overwhelming, right? And then you really can't merge anything. So one way that I do this myself is I make sure that pull requests expire after a very short amount of time, and then I can go back into the backlog and make sure that they're getting done. But by and large, it's about having the work done for me in the background. And usually what ends up happening is I'll have a variety of background agents that produce some level of work, and one of those agents will get the 80% solution. And what I end up having to do is spending the rest of my time focusing on fixing what's missing or adding new features, so on and so forth, to get to the 100% solution. But the idea here is the background agents, as they're working for you behind the scenes, can accomplish a lot more work than you just individually starting from scratch each time.
And to kind of add on to that, in my workflow, I have a local system that runs a local on my GPU agent. Anything I add in my to-do little project list, it just starts off ideas, and none of this code will ever get merged. It just shows me a visual representation of what this project could look like, but I've never had any intent to merge it. I'll always restart from scratch. It's just another way to have my 24/7 compute running. No.
Okay.
I think we have time for one
short question, yeah.
One short question.
Let's make sure. All right, nobody has short questions?
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for listening to our talk. We've got some resources on this last QR code. Feel free to go through them.
Que tem se eu te desejar?